The edge of despair. On the edge of a rocky cliff, high above the dark void of space, stood an alien woman. Her heart was heavy with sorrow, and her mind was a battlefield of confusion. The stars around her sparkled in the endless night, but to her they seemed like distant dreams she could never reach. The world she had once known was gone, and so was everything she had ever cared about. The pain of loss had become a constant companion, a weight that she could never shake off. Her people were scattered across different corners of the galaxy, many of them lost to war and destruction. The hope she once had for a better future had faded, and now it felt like the only way to escape the torment was to step off the edge and fall into the abyss. Her eyes were glazed with tears as she looked down at the black void below. The wind howled through the cliffs, and for a brief moment she thought she heard whispers, as if the very stars were calling to her. But there was nothing for her here, not anymore. There was no place left for her in this world, no purpose to keep fighting. Her past was filled with only pain, and her future seemed empty. She took a step forward, the edge of the cliff now right beneath her feet. The thought of ending it all seemed so tempting. The silence of space promised an escape from the suffering that had plagued her for so long. She closed her eyes and let the wind kiss her face. For just a moment, everything felt still, as though the universe itself was holding its breath. But as she stood there, ready to fall, a voice broke the silence. It was distant at first, barely audible over the wind. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be the wind, or was she hearing things? The voice grew clearer, more distinct. "Don't do it." She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. Who could be out here, so far from civilization? Her eyes scanned the dark landscape behind her, searching for the source of the voice. The rocky cliffs stretched for miles, and she couldn't see anything, just shadows in the darkness. She was alone, wasn't she? The voice came again, this time louder and more urgent. "Please, don't do it." Her pulse quickened, and she felt a shiver run down her spine. There was no one here, no one who could have said those words. The voice sounded familiar, yet it was impossible. Was it her mind playing tricks on her? Was she imagining this? She turned around slowly, trying to locate the source, and then, from the shadows of the distant rocks, a figure appeared. It was a human, a strange yet familiar sight. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes that seemed to see her in a way no one else had. He wasn't like the others she had met before. His presence was different, almost calming. She blinked in confusion. "How did you get here?" she asked, her voice trembling. The human stepped forward, his movements slow and steady. "I came to find you," he replied. His voice was gentle but strong, carrying a kind of warmth that made her hesitate. "I know what you're feeling. I've been there too." She stared at him, disbelief washing over her. "What do you know about what I feel? You're just a stranger." Her voice cracked with frustration. "You don't understand anything." The human didn't respond right away. Instead, he studied her with kind eyes, as though searching for something in her expression. "I don't know everything," he said after a moment, "but I know what it's like to feel like you have nothing left. I know what it's like to be lost, to feel like the world has turned its back on you. But I also know that there's always another way. There's always hope, even when it seems impossible." His words were unexpected. She felt a twinge in her chest, something that hadn't stirred in her for a long time. Hope. Could it be possible? She looked back down at the abyss, the darkness below tempting her once again. It was so easy, so simple, to just let go and disappear. But something in his eyes made her stop. Something made her question if this was truly the end, or if there was something more waiting for her. "Why do you care?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why would you want to help me?" The human stepped closer, his voice soft but firm. "Because everyone deserves a chance to live. I know it's hard, but I've seen people overcome impossible odds. I've seen them rise when all hope seemed lost. You don't have to face this alone. You're not alone." For the first time in a long while, the alien woman felt a flicker of something inside her. It was faint, like a spark in the dark, but it was there. Could she trust this stranger? Could she believe in hope again? The wind howled louder, but she felt the pull of his words, like a lifeline reaching out to her. She stepped back from the edge, her body shaking, but for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel so lost. The human was right. Maybe there was more to life than the pain she had been carrying. Maybe it wasn't too late to find a new path. The darkness was still there, but so was the possibility of something better. She looked at the human, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and uncertainty. "I don't know," she said, her voice trembling, "but I'm willing to try." And in that moment, she made a choice, not to let the darkness claim her, but to take a step into the unknown. The stranger's promise. As the alien woman slowly took a step back from the edge of the cliff, her heart was still heavy with doubt. The weight of her past clung to her like a shadow, making it hard to believe that anything could ever feel right again. She glanced at the human who had stopped her from falling. His presence was strange to her, yet there was something in his calm demeanor that suggested he knew more than he was letting on. He remained quiet for a few moments, giving her the space she needed to collect herself. The wind had begun to die down, leaving behind a heavy silence that made her acutely aware of every breath she took. The stars twinkled overhead, but they didn't offer the same sense of wonder they once had. Instead, they felt distant, like a reminder of the vast emptiness she had come to feel inside. "You saved me," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the stillness of the night. "But why? Why would you do that for someone like me?" The human took another step closer, his boots making a soft crunch against the rocky ground. His eyes, dark but steady, never wavered from her gaze. He didn't seem afraid, even though she could tell he wasn't completely sure about what to say next. Yet there was something in his eyes, something that felt real, something she had almost forgotten. "I've been where you are," he said, his voice low but strong. "I've stood on the edge, just like you. I felt like there was no point in going on, like everything was lost. But I'm here because I've seen that even in the darkest moments, there's always a reason to keep going." She raised an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and skepticism on her face. "You expect me to believe that? After everything I've been through, you think I can just go on?" The human's gaze softened. He shook his head slowly. "No, I don't expect you to just forget your pain. It's not that simple, but what I've learned is that you don't have to face it alone. And I'm here to show you that there's more to this life than just surviving. You can still find meaning, even after everything you've lost." She studied him carefully, trying to make sense of his words. How could he possibly understand? He was human, and she was nothing like him. Her people had faced devastation, wars that left scars across galaxies. She had been part of those wars, fighting alongside others to protect what little remained of her world. But it had all been in vain. Her home was gone. Her family was gone. And now, here she stood, facing a stranger who claimed he had the answers. "I don't even know you," she said bitterly. "How can you promise me that there's something worth fighting for?" The human exhaled deeply, as if he had heard this question 1,000 times before. He stepped forward and extended a hand toward her, a gesture that seemed simple, yet carried a deep meaning. "Because I was once where you are," he repeated, "and I found my way back. I'm offering you the same chance to find yours, not just for survival, but for something better." She hesitated, her gaze flickering between the outstretched hand and the deep abyss behind her. She felt torn. The idea of leaving everything behind, of giving up on the pain that had consumed her for so long, was tempting. But the human's words echoed in her mind, a persistent reminder that maybe there was more to life than just existing in the shadow of despair. The night was still and quiet, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that perhaps this stranger, despite being so different, could offer her something she hadn't dared to believe in for so long, a way forward. But the fear lingered, cold and sharp. Could she truly trust him? Could she trust herself again? "I don't know if I can believe you," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. "I've been lost for so long. I don't know how to find my way back." The human lowered his hand, but his expression remained kind, understanding. "I'm not asking you to have all the answers right now. No one does. But I'm telling you this. You don't have to do it alone. You have a choice, and I'm offering to help you find that choice, no matter how hard it might seem." The alien woman stood there, wrestling with the conflict inside her. The stars above, once so distant, now felt closer, almost as if they were watching her, waiting for her decision. The dark emptiness of the abyss below still called to her, but now it seemed less inviting. The human's words, simple yet powerful, had sparked something inside her, a tiny flicker of hope that she hadn't felt in a long time. Finally, she nodded, just a small movement of her head, but it felt like a huge decision. "Okay," she said quietly. "I'll follow you, but only because you're the first one who's ever shown me that there might be something worth fighting for." The human smiled, the expression warm and genuine. "That's all I ask. You're not alone anymore. I'll help you every step of the way." And in that moment, something shifted within her. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she felt like it was worth walking. The wind died down completely, leaving only the quiet hum of distant stars as they began to walk away from the edge, side by side, toward an unknown future. The human's secret. As they walked away from the cliff's edge, the alien woman's mind buzzed with questions. She could hardly believe that she had made the choice to walk back with the human. Everything about this moment felt strange, like a dream she couldn't quite understand. The weight of her past still pressed heavily on her, yet she couldn't deny the faint stirrings of curiosity that began to form in her chest. Who was this human? What made him different from all the others she had encountered in her life? The human, walking steadily beside her, seemed to sense the questions that swirled in her mind. He didn't rush her, didn't speak at first. Instead, he simply kept walking, his pace calm, as though he had all the time in the galaxy. The quiet between them was comfortable, but the silence left her wondering about the man who had saved her from herself. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of walking, he spoke again. "You're probably wondering why I'm doing this," he said, his voice soft, but with a quiet strength that caught her attention. The alien woman turned her head toward him, her eyes narrowing slightly. "I am," she admitted, her voice guarded. "I don't understand why you'd risk so much for someone like me. I don't even know who you are." The human's face softened, but his expression remained serious. He stopped walking for a moment, allowing the alien woman to do the same. She noticed how the world around them seemed so vast, how the stars shone brightly above them, yet the silence of the void felt so loud in her ears. His words had the weight of something deep, something he had carried for a long time. "I wasn't always like this," he said after a pause. "I wasn't always the person who would stop someone from jumping off a cliff. There was a time when I didn't care about anything or anyone." The alien woman blinked, taken aback by his sudden vulnerability. "What do you mean? You're human. Why wouldn't you care about others?" The human gave a quiet laugh, one that held no humor. It was a laugh born from pain and regret. "I used to think the same way. I used to believe that people were just disposable, that we were all just here to survive, to get through the day. And that was it. But that changed." He paused, his eyes staring into the distance, as if seeing something far beyond the horizon. She could sense that he was far from the man he once was, as though every word he spoke carried the weight of a lifetime of decisions. "I lost everything," he continued, his voice low. "My family, my home, my world. I was part of a war that tore everything apart. I fought for a cause, thinking I was doing the right thing. But in the end, it didn't matter. We lost. And when the battle was over, I was left with nothing but a broken heart and a shattered soul." The alien woman studied him closely, her heart twisting with empathy. She could sense the depth of his pain, a pain that mirrored her own in so many ways. For a moment, they were connected in their shared grief, two lost souls in a galaxy that had forgotten them. "But you didn't give up," she said softly. "You didn't end it all like I almost did." The human looked at her then, his eyes filled with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "No, I didn't. But that doesn't mean it was easy. I spent a long time in the dark, feeling like I was drowning. The pain was suffocating, and there were days when I thought about ending it all, just like you. But something stopped me. Something inside me told me there was still a reason to keep going. I didn't know what that reason was, but I followed it, no matter how small it seemed." He took a step closer, his gaze intense but kind. "I learned that there's always a way out of the darkness. It's not easy, and it's not quick. But if you're willing to keep moving, to take one small step at a time, you'll find that light again. You'll find the reason to keep living." The alien woman felt a rush of emotion she hadn't expected. She had been so consumed by her own grief, her own hopelessness, that she had never considered that someone else could understand her pain. She had never thought that someone like him, someone who had been through so much, could still offer hope. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Why are you sharing your pain with me?" The human's face softened even further. "Because I know what it feels like to think you're alone, to feel like no one cares. But that's not true. You're not alone. I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere." His words hit her harder than she expected. She had never known anyone to speak like this, especially not someone she had just met. It was strange, yet it felt so real, so genuine. For the first time, she wondered if there might be something more to this world than the endless cycle of pain and loss. Maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something different. "You've been through so much," she whispered. "How did you keep going?" The human smiled softly, though there was a sadness in his eyes. "Because I realized that it's not about forgetting the past. It's about learning to live with it, to grow from it. I found strength in my weakness, courage in my fear. And I found a reason to fight, not just for myself, but for others. And I want to show you that you can do the same." She stood there, processing his words, her mind slowly shifting from doubt to something new. Something she couldn't quite name yet, but something she was willing to discover. The human had shown her a glimpse of something she thought was lost forever: hope. With a deep breath, she nodded, the faintest flicker of trust beginning to grow inside her. "Maybe I can learn to fight again. Maybe you're right." The human's smile grew, a small but genuine smile that reflected both understanding and compassion. "I know you can." And with that, they continued walking, the stars above them now seeming a little brighter, their path a little clearer. The future was still uncertain, but the possibility of a new beginning had finally taken root. A desperate choice. The alien woman's footsteps were slow and deliberate as she walked beside the human, her mind still grappling with everything he had said. His words, though comforting, felt like a lifeline thrown to her in the middle of an endless ocean. She didn't know if she could reach for it. The weight of her past, of everything she had lost, was still too heavy. She could still feel the emptiness gnawing at her heart, pulling her down into a well of despair. As they walked deeper into the rocky terrain, the landscape around them became increasingly unfamiliar. The stars above flickered like distant memories, and the ground beneath their feet grew uneven, covered with sharp stones and jagged cliffs. The night seemed to stretch on forever, and the air grew colder with each passing step. The human didn't seem to notice the cold. He walked ahead with a sense of purpose, as though he had a destination in mind, though he never said a word about where they were going. For him, the journey was enough. But for her, each step felt heavier than the last. She could still hear the whisper of the abyss calling to her, urging her to end the pain, to take the easy way out. The silence between them felt suffocating, as though her heart was screaming for release, but she had no voice to answer it. The human glanced over his shoulder, noticing the change in her pace. He slowed down, falling into step with her, His expression was serious, yet still kind, as if he understood the battle raging inside her. "You're still struggling, aren't you?" he asked, his voice low and understanding. She didn't answer at first, but the words in her mind were clear. "I don't know how much longer I can do this." Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling. "I'm so tired," she admitted. "I don't know how much longer I can keep going. The pain, it's too much. Everything I've lost, everything I've seen. It feels like there's nothing left for me. I don't know if I can fight anymore." The human stopped walking, turning to face her fully. There was a quiet intensity in his gaze, but no judgment. "I understand more than you think," he said quietly. "I've felt that way too. I've been at the point where I thought I couldn't go on, where I was ready to just let go. But what I've learned is that there's always a choice, no matter how dark it seems." The alien woman shook her head, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "I don't know if I can make the right choice. I don't know if I can face what's ahead. It feels like I'm trapped in this endless cycle of pain, and the only way out is to end it all." She took a deep breath, her chest tight as she looked down at her hands, the scars of battle still visible on her skin. "I don't even know if I'm strong enough to keep going. I don't know if I can keep pretending that everything will be okay." The human's voice softened, but it carried a quiet strength. "It's okay to feel weak. It's okay to not have all the answers. But what I'm telling you is that you don't have to pretend. You don't have to carry this burden alone. I'm here. And I want to help you find a way forward, even when it feels impossible." Her heart ached, torn between the familiar comfort of the darkness and the uncertain possibility of hope that he offered. It was so tempting, the idea of just giving in, of letting the pain swallow her whole. But there was a part of her, deep down, that wasn't ready to give up yet. "You're asking me to trust you," she said softly, almost to herself. "But how can I? After everything I've been through, how can I trust that things will get better?" The human's gaze remained steady, his expression unwavering. "I'm not asking you to trust me. I'm asking you to trust yourself. You've survived everything that's come your way so far. You've faced battles that should have broken you. And yet here you are. You're stronger than you realize. And that strength is still inside you." She looked at him, his words sinking in slowly. There was a warmth in his voice, a conviction that made her believe, just for a moment, that maybe he was right. Maybe she was stronger than she thought. But even as the thought began to take root, doubt crept in. What if I fail? What if I can't keep going? She took a step back, her body tense as she wrestled with her thoughts. The familiar call of the abyss tugged at her again, whispering promises of peace and release. But she couldn't help but feel that there was something more she hadn't considered. The human's words echoed in her mind, urging her to hold on, to choose a different path. "I don't know if I can," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I'm capable of finding hope again." The human's expression softened, and he placed a hand gently on her shoulder. "It's okay to be scared. But you don't have to face it all at once. Take it one step at a time. That's all you need to do. You don't have to make the perfect choice. You just have to choose to keep moving forward." For the first time, she didn't feel as alone. The weight of her pain didn't disappear, but it felt lighter, somehow, like it wasn't all hers to carry. She realized then that maybe, just maybe, there was still a way forward, a way to reclaim what had been lost. Her gaze turned back to the horizon, where the stars still twinkled above. The path ahead was uncertain, but the human had given her something she hadn't had in a long time. The choice to keep going, to fight another day. The road ahead was still unclear, but with one final deep breath, she made her decision. "Okay," she said quietly, but with a new sense of resolve. "I'll try. I'll take that step." And with that, they continued walking, side by side, into the unknown. The humans passed. As the alien woman walked beside the human, the weight of her decision began to settle in. The air around them was still, the silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. She glanced at him from time to time, his face an open book that seemed to hide as many questions as answers. There was something about him that felt different from anyone she had ever met, a quiet resilience, a strength that didn't come from brute force or physical power, but from something deeper, something more enduring. They reached a small clearing, surrounded by jagged rocks, where the stars shone brightly above them. It felt like a place where time had slowed down, allowing her to catch her breath. The human stopped walking and sat down on a flat rock, patting the spot next to him. The alien woman hesitated but eventually sat beside him, her eyes still distant, as though searching for answers she wasn't sure she wanted to find. She glanced at him again, noticing the way his expression shifted, like a veil of sadness falling over him as his gaze turned towards the endless sky. "I've been thinking," the human said quietly, his voice breaking the silence like a soft ripple in still water. "You've been through so much, and I know you're still fighting with yourself. But if you're going to walk this path, if you're going to trust me, then I think it's time I tell you something about myself. About why I'm here." The alien woman's eyes flickered toward him. She had never asked for his story. She hadn't even realized she wanted to know. But there was something in the way he spoke, like he was about to reveal a piece of himself that had been buried for a long time. She nodded, unsure of what he might say, but feeling a sense of quiet curiosity. The human took a deep breath and began. "I wasn't always this way," he said, his voice soft, but filled with a weight that made her listen closely. "I didn't always know how to help people. There was a time when I was just like you, lost, broken, filled with anger and pain, and thinking that the world was nothing but a series of battles we couldn't win." He paused, his gaze drifting to the ground for a moment before he continued. "I used to fight, not just for survival, but because I thought it was the only way to make the universe listen. I fought in a war that didn't care about the cost, a war that destroyed everything it touched. My people, my family, they were all lost in the chaos. I was part of something that seemed so righteous at the time. I thought we were doing good, fighting for a better future. But that was a lie." The alien woman remained silent, sensing the pain in his words, but she didn't interrupt. There was a vulnerability in his voice that made her want to listen. "The war, it broke me," the human continued, his eyes darkening. "I saw things I can't forget. People I loved, lost in an instant. People who trusted me, who I couldn't protect. I became numb. I didn't care about anything anymore. I just kept fighting, not for the cause, but because I didn't know how to stop. I thought if I kept going, if I kept pushing through the pain, I'd somehow be able to make it all stop. But the truth is, it only made things worse." He fell silent again, his face haunted by memories. The alien woman could feel the weight of his past pressing down on him. He wasn't just a stranger, someone who appeared out of nowhere to offer comfort. He had lived through unimaginable loss, the kind of pain she herself was only beginning to confront. "I reached a point where I couldn't keep going," the human finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought about giving up. I thought about ending it all. Because after everything, what was left? But then, something changed. I don't know what it was, really. Maybe it was a small voice. Maybe it was the memory of someone I had lost. But I realized that I couldn't let the war define me. I couldn't let it steal everything from me. I decided that I would find a way to move forward, not because the pain was gone, but because I still had something to fight for." The alien woman looked at him, her heart heavy with understanding. She could see the depth of his suffering, but also the strength that had grown from it. He wasn't perfect. No one was, but he had found a way to rise from the ashes of his past. And for the first time in a long while, she saw a possibility that didn't involve giving up. She saw someone who had fought through his darkest moments and had come out on the other side, scared but alive. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked, her voice shaky but filled with curiosity. The human turned to face her fully, his eyes meeting hers. "Because you're not alone in this. We all have our battles. We all have our scars. And you may feel like you're carrying the weight of the universe on your shoulders, but I promise you, there is a way forward. I found it, and I believe you can too. The alien woman's chest tightened as the words sank in. She had spent so long thinking that her pain was unique, that no one could possibly understand the depth of her loss. But here was someone who had faced a similar darkness, someone who had chosen to fight when everything seemed hopeless. I don't know if I'm ready, she said quietly, the fear of what lay ahead still gnawing at her. The human smiled gently. You don't have to be ready right now. All I'm asking is for you to take one more step, just one. And I'll be here, every step of the way, just like I was for myself. The alien woman looked up at the stars, the endless expanse of space stretching out before her. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know what the future held. But in that moment, she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, that thought made all the difference. A moment of clarity. The alien woman stood at the edge of the small clearing. The vast, starry sky stretched endlessly above her. The weight of her past was still there, lurking like a shadow, but something had shifted within her. For the first time in a long while, she felt a strange, almost unfamiliar sensation, clarity. It wasn't that the pain had disappeared, nor that the future seemed easy or clear, but there was a spark inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope. The human stood a few paces away, giving her the space to think, to breathe. His silence was comforting in its own way. He wasn't rushing her, wasn't pushing her to make a decision. He had already given her the tools to take the first steps, but it was up to her now to decide what to do with them. The wind had died down, leaving the air still and cool, and the alien woman took a deep breath, allowing the crisp night air to fill her lungs. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting herself feel the full weight of the stillness around her. The stars above seemed to watch her, their light like tiny beacons in the endless night. For a brief moment, it almost felt like the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to decide. She had always been a warrior. For most of her life, she had fought with everything she had, fought for her people, fought for survival, fought for a future that now seemed like a distant dream. But now, as she stood there in the quiet of the night, she realized something important. Survival alone was no longer enough. She didn't want to just exist. She wanted to live. She wanted to find meaning again, even if it felt impossible. She had been searching for purpose in all the wrong places, in the battlefields and in the loneliness of space. But now, with the human standing silently beside her, offering not just his help but his understanding, she began to see something different. The path ahead wasn't about forgetting the past or erasing the scars. It was about moving forward, step by step, even when it seemed like the road was too difficult to walk. The alien woman opened her eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she smiled, a small, tentative smile, but one that felt like the beginning of something new. The human, who had been watching her with quiet patience, noticed the shift and took a step closer. "You're thinking differently," he said softly, his voice low but full of understanding. The alien woman nodded, her smile growing slightly. "I feel lighter," she admitted, her voice still tentative, but growing stronger with each word. "Like there's something more waiting for me, something worth fighting for." The human smiled in return, his eyes warm with approval. "That's the first step," he said. "It's not about making a perfect choice. It's about choosing to move forward, no matter how small the steps are." She took a deep breath and turned to face him fully. "I spent so long living in the past, trying to hold on to things that are gone. But maybe I need to learn to let go. Maybe I need to start living again." The human nodded. "Letting go doesn't mean forgetting. It means accepting that the past has shaped who you are, but it doesn't have to define your future. You have the power to choose your path." For the first time, the alien woman truly believed him. It wasn't just words. There was truth in what he said, a truth that had started to sink in deep into her bones. The past would always be a part of her, but it didn't have to control her. She had a choice, and for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, she wanted to make that choice, to step into the unknown and fight for something more. She turned away from him for a moment, looking up at the stars again. This time, they didn't feel as distant. They felt like they were part of her, part of the journey she was about to take. The future was still uncertain, still full of shadows, but it no longer seemed so overwhelming. "Maybe I can find a way," she whispered to herself, the words sounding strange but also freeing. The human, sensing the change in her, took a step back, giving her the space she needed. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He knew she was ready, ready to make that first step, even if it was small. The alien woman closed her eyes once more, letting the moment settle in. When she opened them again, she looked at the human with a new determination in her gaze. "I'm ready," she said, her voice steady. "I'm ready to keep going. I don't know where the path leads, but I'll take the first step." The human's smile widened. "That's all it takes, one step at a time." And with that, they continued walking together, side by side, the stars above them shining a little brighter, the future no longer an endless void, but a journey waiting to be explored. She had found her clarity, and now she was ready to move forward into the unknown, knowing that the path ahead was hers to shape. A new beginning. The path ahead stretched out before them, long and uncertain, but the alien woman no longer felt the weight of despair dragging her down. The darkness that once seemed all-encompassing had started to fade, replaced by the soft glow of possibility. She walked beside the human, no longer as a lost soul searching for an escape, but as someone who had found the strength to face the unknown. Each step felt lighter than the last, though the future was still a vast, uncharted territory. The air around them was cool, the silence only broken by the soft crunch of their footsteps on the rocky terrain. It was a quiet night, the stars above them hanging like ancient witnesses to the journey they were both on. For the first time in a long time, the alien woman felt a sense of peace settle over her. Not the peace of the past she had lost, but a new peace, one born from the courage to move forward, to choose life over the darkness. As they continued walking, she realized that she had stopped looking over her shoulder. The pain of her past, though still there, no longer controlled her steps. It had shaped her, yes, but it didn't define who she was or where she could go. She had learned that the journey wasn't about erasing the scars, but about finding the courage to live with them. The human glanced at her, sensing the shift in her energy. "How do you feel?" he asked, his voice gentle, as if giving her the space to put into words what she might not have yet understood. The alien woman paused for a moment, considering the question. She looked up at the stars, her mind clear and her heart steady. "I feel like I'm beginning something new," she said slowly, her voice still soft but filled with a quiet strength. "I'm not sure where it will take me, but I know I'm not alone anymore. And for the first time in a long time, that feels enough." The human smiled, his face reflecting the pride he felt for her. "You've taken the hardest step. From here on, it's all about choosing to keep moving, even when the road gets tough. But you've shown yourself that you have the strength to face whatever comes next." She nodded, her eyes glistening with a mix of emotion and newfound resolve. "I know now that I don't have to face it alone. That's the difference. I don't have to carry the weight of the universe by myself." They walked on together, the landscape changing as they moved forward, rocky cliffs giving way to rolling hills and distant valleys. The world around them seemed to reflect the journey they were on, once dark and foreboding, now opening up with endless possibilities. As they approached a small village nestled between the hills, the alien woman couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation, a flicker of excitement she hadn't felt in ages. She had no idea what lay ahead, but she knew it was something worth discovering. The past had shaped her, but it was no longer her prison. The future, though uncertain, was hers to build. The village lights flickered in the distance, welcoming them with a quiet glow. People moved in and out of their homes, their lives filled with small, simple moments. It reminded her of what she had once hoped for, a life that didn't revolve around endless conflict and loss, but a life filled with purpose, connection, and possibility. "We could rest here for the night," the human suggested, noticing the way her gaze lingered on the village. "Maybe tomorrow we take another step. Together." The alien woman looked at him, her heart filled with gratitude. "Yes," she said, a soft smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Tomorrow sounds good." As they entered the village, a quiet sense of calm washed over her. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time in a long time, she was ready to face it, not as a broken soul, but as someone who had rediscovered her strength and purpose. The future was still a mystery, but it was no longer something to fear. It was an open road, waiting to be explored. She had chosen to take that first step, and in doing so, she had begun to reclaim her life, piece by piece. And so, as the stars above witnessed their quiet passage, the alien woman knew that she was no longer standing at the edge of despair. She was moving forward, with hope in her heart, ready to discover what lay ahead. No longer alone, but with a companion who had helped her find the courage to keep going. And that was enough to begin the next chapter of her journey.